Welcome to another edition of 7 Minutes with the Word. Today I'm going to share with you verse 19. Paul says, "For I have often told you before and now tell you again, even with tears, many live as enemies of the cross of Christ. Their destiny is destruction, their God is their stomach, and their glory is in their shame. Their mind is set on earthly things." Today, I'll be talking to you on what I've titled Enemies of the Cross. Now, when you read these verses carefully, you realize that Paul is anguished. He is sad. He says that he's weeping. He's weeping because the Philippians, or some of the Philippians, had opted to live as enemies of the cross, or literally to walk as enemies of the cross. And that pierced his heart and hurt him so deep that Apostle Paul says that he is weeping right here. Now, who are enemies of the cross? Enemies of the cross are not enemies of the physical cross or a physical representation of the cross. Enemies of the cross are enemies of what the cross stands for. They are enemies of the biblical truth of God's atonement for the salvation of humans through the person of Christ. They stand against the ongoing power of the cross and the resulting impact of that power over the lives of those who have accepted Christ as Lord and Savior. The cross is also the narrative or the story of death to self. So enemies of the cross are enemies of death to self. They oppose it. They oppose the idea of dying to self, and they advocate freedom to live the way we want, freedom to allow the flesh to express itself as much as possible. Enemies of the cross refuse to carry the self-dying cross. The Lord actually recommended that the disciples carry their cross so that they deny themselves and die to self. Enemies of the cross don't want this. Enemies of the cross accept self-indulgence, living in self-gratification. For enemies of the cross, the gospel is a cheap grace message that does not demand any commitment at all. So when Paul saw these people that had crept into the church of Philippi, his heart was broken. Today I'm going to draw your attention on two things regarding enemies of the cross. The first is the characteristics of enemies of the cross. And then we're also going to see what their ultimate end is going to be. In this text, there are three characteristics of enemies of the cross. The first is that enemies of the cross have their stomach as their God. So that's the first thing. Their God is their stomach. This qualification of enemies of the cross indicate their idolatry. They live an idolatrous life. And specifically, what they worship is their belly. Their stomach is their God. And the belly here may be a reference in a specific sense to food. There are some people who have enthroned food in their lives and will readily do anything, to get food, even if that means going against the will of God. In a broader sense, the belly here stands for fleshly appetites and fleshly desires. So these enemies of the cross are self-indulgent. They don't feel the need to commit themselves to Christ. They want to give vent to the appetites of the body. They want to live the way the flesh dictates. So they've made their belly their gods. Number two, They glory in their shame. This expression indicates their misplaced priorities. What that means is that instead of being ashamed of something that normally should have caused them shame, they rather glory into it. So that's a paradox. When you do something that should have brought you to a point where you are ashamed, you rather take pride in it. For example, somebody who glories or takes pride in his riches, and the riches were embezzled. Or a minister of the gospel who takes pride in his wealth, whereas he commercialized the gospel to make that wealth. I remember somebody who wanted to woo me into preaching this commercial gospel, and he was so proud of his methods, the methods he used to actually cause people to chisel money from their pockets. That is glorying into something that should cause you shame. The third characteristic is that they set their minds on earthly things. Here we are seeing what their focus is in life, what their values are, what their center of interest is all about. And instead of their focus to be on Christ, on doing his will, on wholeheartedly following him, they commit themselves in following the things of the world. Their values are the things of the world. Their interest, so long as the world is going to give them what they want. These are three characteristics of enemies of the cross. And then Apostle Paul specifies, if you get back into the verse, what their destiny is going to be all about. It will be destruction. This word that Paul uses here is translated elsewhere in the New Testament by perdition. And that will mean that those who live as enemy of the cross will actually face eternal damnation. Beside the fact that even their physical lives sometimes are tampered with and are destroyed. So brothers and sisters, I beseech you, I urge you, despite the intensity of the temptation, don't be an enemy of the cross, because the end thereof is good. God bless you. Like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Lord bless you abundantly.